Morning.
And you are juror 52.
52, correct.
All right. A couple things before I turn you over to the attorneys. First of all, I'm going to swear you in so that all your answers are under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I will.
All right, thank you. Also, I'm going to ask you to move close to the microphone so that we can pick up your voice. Also, I'm wearing my mask, given how we are fairly close, but there is plexiglass between us. There's plexiglass between you and the attorneys when they're asking questions. So if you feel that it would be more comfortable or that we could hear you better with the mask removed, feel free to remove the mask while you're being examined. Your choice. I'm not going to make you do it, but if you feel comfortable doing it, that'd be fine.
Got it.
Okay. First of all, you filled out the questionnaire, and thank you for doing that. A lot of good information here. Is everything that you answered on that questionnaire true and correct?
Yes.
All right. Any changes or additions to the questionnaires that you can think of right now?
No, sir.
Okay. And the attorneys will probably go into more individual questioning about this because sometimes when you fill that out months ago, other things happen. You hear other things that might change opinions. Or you just, in reflection, think, oh, I probably should have put that in there. Or anything like that. Right now, it sounds like you don't have anything to volunteer, but is that correct?
Correct.
But the attorneys might prompt a memory. Feel free to add something that is different from your questionnaire. You're not going to get into trouble. What we're looking for are honest, open answers as we go forward. So, you weren't supposed to read any articles or watch any media about this case. But we recognize that since this was months ago that you filled out the questionnaire, since the time you filled out the questionnaire and now, have you inadvertently been exposed to information? For example, maybe you see a headline in passing, or you talk to somebody about, somebody says, hey, did you hear? And it's something about this case, and since we told you, don't tell anybody you're a juror in this case, you can't exactly stop people. Anything like that happen to you that you became inadvertently aware of some information about the case since the questionnaire and today?
Yes, definitely. I've seen headlines just speaking on the case coming up, just saying the dates, what to look out for, just different headlines like that through media outlets, so yahoo.com
Okay.
in particular.
Anything other than like kind of the basic logistics of the trial?
No.
Okay. Do you hear anything about any other, about any of the parties, the attorneys, pretrial matters, related civil litigation, anything like that?
No, sir.
All right. And the reason we ask is because you may have heard things about the case, and that was our first question on the questionnaire. The whole point there is, it's all right to have read about it. It was hard to avoid. It's all right to even form opinions based on what you've heard and seen. But as a juror, you have to put all that aside. Decide this case just on the evidence you hear in the courtroom. Essentially be a blank slate. And apply the law as I give it to you. Do you think you could do that?
For sure.
Okay, thank you. All right, we gave you a long witness list. Did you recognize any of the witnesses on it?
No, sir.
All right. And we estimate that the trial is going to be about 4 weeks once we start. And we're anticipating starting on March 29th at 9 a.m. Does that trial length, can you make that work?
Yes.
All right. Any concerns about being on this jury as far as timing?
No.
Okay. All right. In that case, then, I'm going to turn you over to Mr. Nelson, who's going to ask some questions first. Regarding juror number 52, you may inquire, Mr. Nelson.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here this morning. Were you here on Friday, too?
I was, yes.
Well, thank you for your patience. Sometimes these things take a little bit longer than we anticipate. So what I would like to do this morning, sir, is kind of ask you a series of kind of broad and general questions to get to know you a little bit better. And then I'm going to follow up with some specifics on your questionnaire.
Okay.
Understanding it's been a while since you filled this out and may not remember exactly what you wrote.
Okay.
All right. So let's assume you and I were to have met in some other circumstance, a social event, a party, whatever. What are a couple of things about you that I would walk away knowing?
That I'm a pretty friendly, positive person. Generally have a positive attitude, look at a positive outlook on things.
Okay. Any hobbies, special interests, things of that nature?
I'm majorly into sports, a big basketball fan. Sports, and then writing and music. So,
okay, great. Now, in your personal, well, let me ask you this: you got at some point you learned that you were a prospective juror in this particular case, right?
correct.
And you had obviously heard about this case prior to receiving that notice. When you got the notice that you were a potential juror in this case, what was your initial reaction?
I think I was more like, it's kind of odd because I had never expected to be on jury duty anytime soon during that period. So it was just kind of surprised, shocked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you, knowing that it was about this case, did you have any concerns for your personal safety, the safety of your family, anything of that nature?
No, not at all.
Okay, great. And how about with respect to COVID-19? Do you have any concerns? You've obviously taken a lot of precautions here.
Well, not at all.
Okay. In your personal or professional life, can you think of a situation where you were called upon to resolve a conflict between two people?
Absolutely. So in my personal life, I coach youth sports, and a lot of times parents have conflicts with maybe how much their kid is playing. So a lot of times I might have to step in and mediate, maybe amongst two parents that have a conflict within that, and it's just a matter of just communicating and just giving everybody a platform to talk and listen, giving the next person a chance to listen to actually what's going on.
Okay. I think that's a great example. In terms of, so you would say that hearing both sides of the story is a pretty important component.
Everybody has to have a chance to kind of communicate what's going on or what their thoughts are.
Sure. Now, in terms of, again, your personal or professional life, can you think of a situation where you've been called upon to determine who's lying about a particular situation or who's telling the truth?
Same type of thing within coaching, dealing with parents and with youth. Sometimes you do get people that kind of bend the truth, and it's just a matter of not necessarily proving that they're lying, but you kind of pick up on different patterns as you get to know the people and get to know the parents and the kids. You pick up on their patterns, and you start to understand when they kind of possibly are bending the truth a little bit.
Okay. So in that situation, one of the things that you would be doing if you're a juror is, number one, resolving a conflict, right? Mm-hmm. And conflicts that may emerge in the jury room as well, right? Conflicts between other jurors. Do you recognize that?
I've never thought of that, actually.
Okay. So you may be in a jury room, and let's assume, or hypothetically, there's a particular piece of information or evidence that you or that one juror thinks is extremely important, and that another juror or jurors think is irrelevant, right? That is ultimately a conflict between the jurors, right?
Yeah.
How would you approach that situation based on your personal and professional experiences?
I think by giving each juror a chance to state what their thought process is, why they think this thing is either relevant or irrelevant, and getting the next person to do the same thing. And then from there, we would have to kind of discuss, I guess as a group, we would have to discuss on what makes sense.
Okay.
And there's always a possibility that maybe, depending on what it is, they possibly could both be right, one could be wrong, one could be right. But I think it would come down to a group discussion to kind of determine which way to lean on that. Okay.
And in terms of, the type of person you are, obviously we're taking you at face value. We don't know what's in your heart or your head. Let's assume that it's you that has a very strong opinion that this piece of evidence is relevant or important, right? And others just think that that's nuts, mm-hmm. that it's not relevant. Are you the type of person who agrees merely for the purpose of consensus, or do you stand your ground and defend your position.
Yeah, I have no problem standing on what I'm saying or what I believe until proven otherwise.
Okay.
That's definitely just who I am.
Okay. And in terms of your, again, your role as a juror is to determine, you may have two witnesses who testify, right? And they're both looking at the exact same piece of evidence or the same event or whatever, but they interpret it or view it differently, right? So your job is to determine which of these people's testimony is credible. So who's lying, who may be lying, or who may be telling the truth about a particular situation. Other than kind of hearing out both stories, what tools can you bring to that analysis?
I think it's a matter of, so like I said, that listening aspect is important, and understanding what's the thought process behind it. I think that kind of is how you determine that, or at least for me, is just understanding the thought process behind it, and it would have to make sense logically to me individually. So if it doesn't make sense logically to me as a person, it would be hard for me to comprehend it.
Okay. Well, you said something interesting a little bit ago, too, in terms of until you would be proven wrong or proven otherwise, right? There was
Correct.
a comment in that. So can you think of a situation in your life where you have been 100% certain about something, only later to determine you were wrong?
Yeah, I don't have an exact example, but it does happen. I mean, like with maybe my siblings or my friends, we might be discussing something, and I was plenty. I mean, like I said, I talk sports a lot with my friends, so we might be discussing maybe a stat or something, and I could be so adamant on this is correct, and they might pull it up, like actually look it up, pull up the stat, and I might be wrong. I have no problem admitting when I'm wrong either. So it's just a matter of, okay, well, you pulled it up, and now that's what that is. I am 100% wrong.
Okay. And so are you the type of person who kind of draws from that experience, and maybe next time you're talking stats, you remember that? And
Oh, yeah, I definitely remember. Yeah.
Okay.
So then that's kind of put in the back of my mind and kind of cataloged in my brain.
Okay, great. So again, one of your jobs as a juror is the judge will give you the law. You'll sit through the trial. You'll hear all of the evidence. You'll hear all of the testimony. And at the end of the trial, the judge will give you rules of law. Are you able to, A, listen to the entirety of the evidence in this case in an impartial manner?
Absolutely.
So any prior opinions you may have formed about this case, you're telling us you can set those aside and judge this case on the evidence as presented in court alone.
For sure.
Great. And at the end of the case, then, the judge will give you rules of law. And I know that you're not a lawyer, so, but you may read the law and you may think it's wrong or that it should be changed. You may have an opinion about the law. Are you able to apply the facts as you hear them in court to the law, even if you disagree with the law?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I have a few just sort of follow-up questions on your questionnaire, sir. And again, I know it's been a couple of months since you've answered these questions, and I'm not trying to trick you or anything like that, okay? The first question that you're asked is some questions about what you remember hearing about the case. And you gave a pretty detailed response based on what you had seen in the news. I mean, generally, you remember that?
What was the exact question?
I guess that was sort of a confusing question.
Yeah.
Do you remember what you wrote about what you had heard about this case, generally?
I don't remember what I wrote, but I mean, what I heard was pretty much the facts where I don't know what I wrote, but yeah, so it's pretty much, I have no idea what I wrote.
Right. You remember hearing that Mr. Floyd had attempted to buy something with a fake bill or check.
Right.
And somehow he ended up on the ground with Chauvin using his knee against Floyd's neck to hold him in place, crowd surrounding, they start recording. So it's
Yeah.
basic recitation of what you understood happened on that particular day, right?
Right.
And ultimately, you understand, or you remember hearing that there were 2 autopsies, one that said Floyd may have died from a previous condition, and another saying something else. So if you were, again, in this case, to be listening to the evidence, and say, for example, only one autopsy is presented in court, can you set aside what you may have heard about any other information and only focus on what was presented in court?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, great. Now you were asked a couple of questions about your impression of Mr. Chauvin and Mr. Floyd, and with respect to both of those individuals, you have a neutral sort of. You indicated you have a sort of a neutral opinion, and ultimately, with respect to Mr. Chauvin, you wrote, "I do not believe the defendant set out to murder anyone. However, based on the video, I'm not sure about what the reasoning could be." Do you remember writing that?
No, but I still I stand on that still, but I don't remember necessarily writing that.
Yeah, sure. And again, I'm not. That's what you.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to trick you. Would you be able to listen to what people may come in and say about police training, about police practice, and what any potential reasons may be?
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of times I like to understand the thought process behind something. That's kind of how I understand things is by hearing somebody's thought process and letting them actually speak their thoughts.
Okay, so let me skip ahead a little bit. In any criminal trial in this country, the defendant has no obligation to ask a single question, present any evidence, and obviously the defendant has he has the right to remain silent.
Absolutely.
Right? So if you're not able to hear directly from Mr. Chauvin would you hold that against him about what his thought process was?
No, because I believe, isn't it then a matter of whatever's presented then? So, I mean, I would have to come to kind of in my own brain, kind of come to some type of conclusion on what, or I guess the court would have to come to some type of conclusion on what the process was. I mean, since he would remain silent on that. So.
Okay, so you're willing to adhere to that principle of law?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And with respect to Mr. Floyd, you say, I view him as just an average, regular man, no other information about him?
Correct.
Okay, great. It indicates that there's a question about watching a video of Mr. Floyd's death and how many times you think you had seen that video. And so I just want to make sure we're on the same page as to what video you're talking about and what video we're talking about, all right? Because it may be different. There was you understand that a bystander filmed this incident. That video got uploaded to a social media platform, and then it went viral. Is that the video you think you have seen in the past?
I believe so. It was a bystander uploaded social media video.
Yep. Okay. And then have you seen any other videos, because there were other body-worn cameras that had been released, there were some security cameras that people released. Have you seen any other video of the incident?
No, I have not.
Okay. Now, in terms of that video, the bystander video, have you watched it in its entirety, or have you just seen what was presented on news channels as part of smaller segments as part of the story?
I've not seen it in its entirety.
Okay. But you've seen 30-second, maybe a minute clip here and there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And you indicated at that time you'd seen it 2 to 3 times, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that
maximum?
Okay. I understand.
Yeah.
Understand you weren't counting, thinking that you needed to ever be asked that question. But you also indicated that you have talked with some family and friends or coworkers, or potentially discussed it online. I want to kind of parse those into two categories.
Okay.
You've talked about it with your friends and family, right?
Yes, correct.
Have you posted any opinions on social media about it?
No.
Okay. But when you've talked with your friends and family, you wrote, "My opinion has been, why didn't the other officer stop Chauvin?"
Okay.
Do you remember, I mean, can you explain that a little bit more, or what opinion you had formed about that?
About which part? Which?
About, well, you say, "My opinion has been, why didn't the other officers stop Chauvin?" I mean, just what do you mean by that opinion?
Meaning, why didn't the other officers do any type of intervening or something? That's all I mean.
Okay. I'm just curious in terms of your impression of Officer Chauvin,
Yeah.
right? So did you form the opinion that he was doing something wrong?
I don't know if he's doing something wrong or not, but somebody died from the situation. So I mean, I like I said, I don't think he had any intention of harming anybody, but somebody did die. So even if you have no intention of doing something and something happens, somebody could have possibly still intervened and prevented that.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
that's kind of my thought process.
that makes
So yeah, so it's kind of like if say if I'm not paying attention and I'm driving my car, somebody can still tap me and say, "Hey, pay attention." So I don't know. I mean, that's my thought process. Is somebody can intervene regardless of just somebody can intervene if something's going possibly wrong.
Okay, fair enough. You were asked a couple of questions about. You were asked a question about the impact to the Twin Cities community in the aftermath of Mr. Floyd's death, the protests, and your response was that you have. There was asked if you think the Twin Cities was positively or negatively impacted, and you responded, "Neither. The protests have the potential to have positive impact, but I have seen no impact so far." Can you explain what you meant by that?
Meaning, so when I say it has the potential to be positive, it just means that what comes from that just hasn't happened in terms of if there's possibly changes that need to be made, just what needs to happen in general, just in order to see, because like I said, somebody did pass away from this, so something positive either has to come from it or nothing comes from it. It was something positive could be, like I said, just simple, maybe a few changes in the way things are handled. I don't know. I don't know what they could be, but I do feel like something positive could possibly come from it. I don't know what negative could come. Like I'm not the type of person that kind of harps on the negatives. I don't even know what the negative impacts could be personally.
Okay. You were asked a question about whether you have personally ever seen the police use more force than was needed, and you checked the box yes, and you wrote, "In downtown Minneapolis, I've seen police body slam, then mace an individual simply because they did not obey an order quick enough." Was that, like, it's obviously something you personally observed, right?
Correct.
Was it a friend of yours, or were you just a passerby to that situation?
Just passing by.
Okay. Did you see the entirety of the contact between the police and this individual, or do you think it's possible you may have missed something?
I definitely could have missed something. I just was walking down the street.
But you formed the opinion based on what you saw that the police used more force than was necessary in that circumstance?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. And are you able to set that kind of aside, and you understand that situation is different than this situation, right?
Absolutely, yeah, both isolated incidents.
Okay. Now, you didn't give us much information, and you remember you have the ability to say that something is private, but you were asked, have you or someone close to you ever been arrested for a crime? And you wrote yes. And how you thought the police handled that arrest, and you said they acted professionally. Was that a personal situation or a friend?
Personal.
Okay. Was that the driving ticket that you referenced later?
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah.
And it was like a bad license or something like that?
Yes, correct.
Okay. You were asked a series of questions about there were a series of just blanket statements. And then you were asked to rank your opinion from strongly agree to strongly disagree to each of these statements. And there's just a couple I want to cover with you. And then I am nearing the end of my questions for you, sir. In terms of these statements, there is a statement that reads, discrimination is not as bad as the media makes it out to be, and you strongly disagreed with that. Can you explain your thinking in that?
I think it's well beyond what the media can even report. Just in general, just because discrimination is such a broad thing. It's a broad spectrum of things. It would be impossible for the media, I think, to cover it all, because it could be some of the smallest things can be discrimination, and sometimes there's just no way for it all to be covered.
Okay, so you think that there's more discrimination? You interpreted that question to be that there's more discrimination that has occurred than the media could just ever even cover.
Correct.
Do you think that sometimes the media exaggerates discrimination?
Well, yes. I think that's part of their job, I believe.
Okay. And do you think that there are certain circumstances where something could be perceived as discrimination even though it wasn't?
Yeah. I wouldn't say that it wasn't, but I mean, some of discrimination is perception.
Right.
So I can't say that somebody else's perception is automatically incorrect.
Right.
That's their perception. If they feel like they were possibly discriminated against, I feel like they have the right to feel that way.
Sure. But can you also see how the other person who is conducting the discriminatory act may have a different perception?
Absolutely. And I think that's where, just in general, better communication, needs to be done.
Sure.
It's just a matter of communicating the thought process and what's going through each person's mind.
Okay. You also, there's a statement that says, police in my community make me feel safe, and you somewhat agreed with that. Is there a reason that you may feel that police aren't making you feel safe?
Well, just like the incident from earlier that was just stated, where I seen the kid kind of get slammed to the ground. That doesn't necessarily make me feel safe, but also, the gym I go to, there's a few officers that go there that they're great guys. So it's like that's where that somewhat comes in. I wouldn't want to see anybody get body slammed, but also I know some great guys. So
okay. In that situation, did you try to intervene with the police, or were you just a passive observer?
Just pass by.
Okay, gotcha. There is a statement that says, "I support defunding the Minneapolis Police Department," and you somewhat disagreed with that. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I don't quite know what defunding would look like all the way. I haven't read up enough on it. So I don't know whether I would completely disagree or agree. I know benefits to the police. I guess I don't know enough on it to really. I would have to read up a lot more to actually form a strong opinion.
Sure. You were asked a couple of questions about both the Black Lives Matter movement and the Blue Lives Matter movement. You indicated that you have a very favorable impression of the Black Lives Matter movement, and you wrote, "Black lives just want to be treated as equals and not killed or treated in an aggressive manner simply because they're black." Can you just explain that a little bit more?
Explain my answer?
Yes.
Could you repeat what you explain?
Sure. What you wrote is, Black lives just want to be treated as equals and not killed or treated in an aggressive manner simply because they are black.
Okay.
So, I mean, I guess I'm asking is, I understand that your perception of the Black Lives Matter organization is favorable, but
Can I pause you? I don't know Black Lives Matter as an organization.
okay.
I don't know it as an organization. So maybe that's. I mean, I don't know if that's how the question said. I don't know if it said Black Lives Matter organization. I don't view it as that. So I don't.
Okay.
That's not how I subscribe to that.
So I think it's been in previous jurors, it's been sort of somewhat described as a movement on one hand and organization.
I don't think of it as either. I just think of it as a statement.
Okay, fair enough. And with respect to the Blue Lives Matter, you had a neutral opinion and you wrote, although I do believe officers' lives matter, I feel like the concept of Blue Lives Matter only became a thing to combat Black Lives Matter, whereas it shouldn't be a competition. Stand by that proposition?
Yes, because like I said, Black Lives Matter is just a statement. It's not a thing. It's just people of black, pigment, their lives matter. It's just a statement.
Sure, and I agree.
Yeah.
You have a friend or relative who works as a corrections officer, is that right?
Correct.
And again, without identifying the organization with whom he or she works, is that local here in the Twin Cities?
Yes.
And by corrections officer, do they work actually in the jail, or do they work like as a probation officer in the community?
In juvenile detention centers.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. If you were to, you understand that many, I don't know if they're a civilian person or a trained deputy, but if you were to sit as a juror on this case, would you call up your relative and say, hey, this is what they're saying is training, that's proper training. Is that how you guys are trained?
No.
Okay. So my last questions for you, sir, have to do with the last question on the survey, which the last two questions are, do you want to serve as a juror in this case? And you checked the box, yes. And you were then asked why. And you said, because of all the protests and everything that has happened after the event, this is the most historic case of my lifetime, and I would love to be a part of it. Can you just explain your thinking in terms of how do the protests and things that have happened afterwards have to do with the facts and evidence in this case?
Well, there's no correlation between the protests and the facts. The facts are the facts. There's no correlation between those two things.
Okay.
Me stating that this is possibly a historic moment is just based on the different movements that have come from this. That's just the fact of the matter.
Sure. So I mean, it's kind of what I understand you to be saying is that this is a historic event in many regards, right?
Yes.
And again, you're willing to listen to the facts and evidence in this case, apply the law, and be a fair and impartial juror.
Correct.
All right. If I may have just a couple minutes, Your Honor. Follow-up question, sir. So I understand that you coach youth sports, right?
Correct.
And I don't know anything about where or whom or anything of that nature. I guess the question that I have for you is, if you understand that one possible outcome would be a not guilty verdict,
Correct.
and can you foresee a circumstance where you would be agreeable to a not guilty verdict?
Yes.
And would you be able to go to the kids you coach and explain why you did what you did?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, we'll pass for cause.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, good morning.
Good morning.
One of the interests that you indicated that you had questioned by counsel was in writing.
Yes.
Can you please tell us a little bit about what kind of writing you do?
Well, I enjoy, I guess, creative writing, just different writing projects in terms of scripts, poems, just any type of creative writing.
And do you publish any of these, or are you
No.
trying to publish?
Nope, this is just for my own personal, it's just a personal hobby.
So notice that you've spent some significant time in the banking industry.
Yes.
Without discussing your specific employer, can you please share with us what is it about the banking industry that draws you?
It's the consistency, the freedom that it allows me to, I guess, help others in a way. In the specific type of banking that I'm in, I can kind of see people's goals come to fruition. That kind of gives me a sense of accomplishment.
In the role, in the job description that you provided, it seems that you are probably one of the individuals who's interacting with the customer one-on-one quite a bit. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Would you describe yourself then as a people person?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
Introvert, extrovert?
Probably more extrovert than introvert.
I wanted to ask you a few questions about drug use and whether you know anyone or have observed a friend or even an acquaintance struggle with illegal drug use.
Yes, I have.
And can you share with us a little bit your opinions of people who may struggle with drug use?
My opinion on them is no different than my opinion on anybody else. It's just something that they're struggling with, that they're possibly trying to get through, but they're still just like anybody else.
Would it be fair to say that you would not judge someone more favorably or less favorably if you learned that they had a struggle with illegal drug use?
Correct.
Now, of course, I asked you about your job and what drew you to that. Can you tell us a little bit more about what draws you to coaching youth sports?
Like similar to my job, I can kind of see, this time kids set a goal or just grow in general and to be positive adults. To me, that gives a sense of accomplishment for myself, to see them grow into adults, to successful adults.
Now, this probably has never happened, but one could hear of a situation where, say, a parent could be a little overly enthusiastic during a game and maybe give you some coaching advice on the spot. Has that ever happened to you?
All the time.
Right?
All the time, yeah.
And maybe a couple of parents could maybe have disagreements about how much playtime their kid's getting.
Yep.
Have you ever seen a situation where two parents, either on the same team or opposite teams, kind of start getting into a conflict or a yelling match?
Yes.
Have you ever done anything to calm or de-escalate that situation?
Absolutely. With me being kind of the coach and kind of that mediator, that middle person, I can they kind of would listen to me, and I can let each person get their voice heard, let each person talk, and kind of let them figure it out that way by me being the mediator and letting each person get their voice heard, communicate, and see if they can come to a common ground or agree to disagree.
I wanted to ask you another question about an answer you gave regarding, or talking about the issue of intent.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that you expressed the opinion that you believe that no one had an intent to do any particular harm that day, the day of George Floyd's death. Is that right?
Correct.
You understand that if you're called to serve as a juror, you have to set aside all opinions. Intent is an issue that will be contested in this case. Do you think it would be difficult for you to do that, or would you be able to look at this case completely as a clean slate?
I don't think it'd be that difficult at all. I think I can definitely look at it from an unobjective point of view.
All right. One moment, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor. The state passes for cause.
All right, juror number 52. You are going to serve on this jury. Okay. And so we're going to reconvene for the trial itself on March 29th at 9 a.m. As you've seen, there are sometimes delays. If that time changes, we will advise you accordingly. In fact, we'll probably call everybody or send an email just as a reminder in any case. But if you don't hear from us, it's March 29th at 9 a.m. The deputy's going to take some paperwork from you. But in the meantime, remember, do whatever you can to avoid reading about this case, watching on TV. Avoid it as much as you can so that everything you decide in this case is going to be based on only what you hear in the courtroom. Any questions?
No, sir.
All right. Thanks. Then you can go with the deputy. We're going to break.